The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Bernie wins Indiana. It makes a contested convention that much more likely. I'll explain why. First, let's look at yesterday's results from the Indiana primary. Bernie Sanders, 52.5%. That nets him 43 delegates. Hillary Clinton, 47.5% of the vote. That nets her 37 delegates. Net impact, Lewis, of this win for Bernie Sanders is +6 in terms of delegates. So a win for Bernie, you never want to understate the importance of winning primaries. It is sort of a prerequisite to being the nominee. But in terms of the delegate math, only shifting the balance by 6. And that, I think, coming as a disappointment to many Bernie supporters.
Yeah, but still, it makes the contested convention more likely. I mean, Bernie is, I know he was so certain of that, as we discussed yesterday.
Well, I'm increasingly certain, too.
Are you?
Yeah, let's look at the delegate math. I mentioned the gap was closed by 6. And here's where things stand in terms of clinching. Now, that's a nice-looking table, Lewis. I have to say, these tables have improved drastically over the last few weeks. Let me present the data to you of the delegates. Now, we'll go through without superdelegates and with superdelegates. The superdelegates don't vote until the convention. So this scenario I'm showing to our TV audience is the possibility of clinching before the convention. Clinton, 1,700 delegates, needs 683. That is 61% of the remaining pledged delegates. That's not very likely. It's not likely that Hillary will secure 61% of the remaining pledged delegates before the convention. Bernie Sanders needs 973. That is nearly 90% of the remaining pledged delegates. So what I can say, Lewis, with some certitude, is that Bernie Sanders is definitely not going to clinch this nomination before the convention. And Hillary Clinton is very unlikely to clinch this thing before the convention. Am I misunderstanding what seems to be relatively simple math?
I think you have a firm grasp on it, but that means that this will be in the hands of the superdelegates because they can still decide.
They can. And let's now consider superdelegates, which makes no sense in terms of clinching pre-convention, but okay, at least it'll give us a sense of the picture once we get to the convention. Again, Hillary Clinton needs 683. Once you consider the superdelegates, that's 37% of remaining available pledged and superdelegates. Bernie Sanders needing 973 puts him at 53.3% required of the remaining pledged and superdelegates. How would you handicap, Lewis, the probability of this going to a contested convention for the Democrats unless Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton were to drop out before then, which would change the scenario?
You're asking me, I'm going to put a percent chance on this?
Yeah. Do you think it's 50-50 that this ends up unresolved before the convention? You think it's 100% chance? How would you handicap it?
I would go, I'd say about 70% chance this will end with a contested convention.
I'm going 85%.
Okay.
Even as high as 86.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's bold.
The math suggests that, and I tend to stick with the math in most of these cases. And what's interesting is we've seen so much critique from the Bernie Sanders campaign of the entire superdelegate system. But now that this is looking more and more like there will be a contested convention, you hear more and more talk from the Bernie Sanders campaign of how to play the superdelegate game, wooing superdelegates, the negotiations, etc. I don't criticize Bernie Sanders for that. You can still use the system that's in place, even if you're critical of the system. This is like saying, hey, anyone who criticizes how campaign finance is set up shouldn't raise money because they're against it. Well, hold on a second. That's not a fair critique. In order to get in power in the first place, they're going to have to use the system that's available. I think that's an unfair criticism of the Sanders campaign. Hey, you criticize superdelegates and now you're trying to use them to win. What kind of a criticism is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, is it using the system available to you, or is it that you are at the mercy of that system?
Well, fair enough.
I mean, I think that's more like it. But you know what you're getting into if you run as a Democrat or a Republican.
Yes, you do.
You are at the mercy of that organization.
Huge news on the Republican side. Ted Cruz has ended his presidential campaign by elbowing his wife in the face after Trump won again and punching her. I will have video. You see the picture here of her elbow connecting aggressively, or his elbow rather, connecting aggressively with Heidi Cruz's face. Well, Louis, let's start with the numbers and get to the punching your spouse part a little bit later. Yesterday in Indiana, Donald Trump getting 100% of the delegates, according to the New York Times as of this morning. 53% of the vote in Indiana, which is a winner-take-most state, got Donald Trump 51 delegates. Ted Cruz, 36% of the vote, 0.0 delegates. And John Kasich, the guy who is in fourth place now in a two-man race, amazing, 7.6% of the vote. You've got to feel really bad if you're Kasich, right?
Yeah. It's I know why he stayed in, but
I don't.
It's
no, I understand.
It's time to stop.
Yeah. He has an announcement for today. You might have already heard it by the time you listen to the show. I don't know what it is. You think Kasich is dropping out?
Of course.
You really think so?
Yeah. Well, there's no point now.
He just put out like a Star Wars-like ad saying he's staying in or something like that.
Well, I don't know unless he's announcing some weird running mate like Cruz did.
On that note, Ted Cruz, who just yesterday said that Indiana was, quote, neck and neck, immediately dropped out of the Republican race after losing. Here is Ted Cruz's very emotional and the most forced and awkward delivery of a speech that maybe we've seen so far, other than Jeb Bush asking for people to clap for him. Take a look. Here's Ted Cruz dropping out.
From the beginning, I've said that I would continue on as long as there was a viable path to victory.
That was a lie.
Tonight, I'm sorry to say, it appears that path has been foreclosed.
Yes.
Together, we left it all on the field in Indiana. We gave it everything we've got. But the voters chose another path. And so, with a heavy heart, but with boundless optimism,
for what?
For the long-term future of our nation, we are suspending our campaign. But hear me now.
Yeah. He also punched and elbowed his wife in the face right after the announcement. Really strange. We have it on video here, and we can maybe play it a couple times for people. It's pretty amazing. There he is, punch to the face, then elbow. Would you call that a combo?
Yeah, well, I'm a gamer, and in the world of gaming, that's the old 1-2.
This is maybe, Ben Carson, Jeb Bush, and Ted Cruz. These are some of the most awkward people that have run for president in a very long time. John Kerry fumbling a football pass is nothing compared to what we've seen from these three gentlemen.
Yeah, there's a lot of awkward stuff with Cruz. The way he talks, his speech delivery, everything. And, part of me, I know what happened in Indiana was tragic for the Cruz campaign, but part of me can't help but wonder if this had something to do with Carly falling off that stage.
Well, I was thinking, Carly Fiorina was his running mate for like a week. He apparently needed her because she's the expert in firing people and destroying jobs. And when Ted Cruz started thinking, I might need to fire all of my staffers, what better way than to bring on Carly Fiorina? Because she's the expert in that.
Yeah, well, he shouldn't have named her his running mate. He should have just contracted her as a campaign advisor.
Yeah, or someone to restructure his organization. Congratulations to Carly, though, for being the first person to lose the same primary twice in an election season.
That is an achievement. Yeah, it's quite the record she has now.
Notice, though, no endorsement, no mention even of Donald Trump by Ted Cruz. That I think is going to be something to discuss, and we'll discuss it a little bit later. Why did God tell Heidi Cruz and Rafael Cruz Sr. that Ted was going to be the president, that he had to be the president? Is this God working in mysterious ways?
As usual, that's always how it goes. Yeah, or it was just a test of what? I don't know.
Yeah. Bryn wrote to me saying Cruz should be forced to carry his candidacy to term, even if it's not viable. That's clever. That's clever, right?
Very clever.
Good one for Bryn. So how does the delegate situation look? Let's take a look now at the delegate math on the Republican side. Donald Trump, 1,007 delegates, needs 230. That's 51.7% of the remaining delegates. He's still not a shoo-in, Lewis. He's still not a shoo-in. Then you'll see Cruz and Rubio. This is so crazy. Cruz and Rubio in second and third place. They're out, though. And then Kasich, fourth place with 2 candidates. I mean, it's got to feel really bad to be running against one person and be fourth.
Yeah. I'm sure. I don't know what Kasich is thinking, but
well, this is the momentum he's been waiting for.
Yeah. What's going to happen now? I mean, I suppose those Cruz supporters will move over to Kasich.
Well, that's the question.
It's not going to matter.
The Cruz supporters are too radical to go with Kasich. That's where I think the problem is. But
they're too Jesus-y to go with Trump.
Trump's winning the evangelical vote. That's what doesn't make any sense. And you do realize, Lewis, that if Rubio and Ted Cruz release their delegates and say, go to Kasich, Kasich gets to 872, and then he would only need 82% of the remaining delegates to clinch, which, by the way, is impossible. But he would only need 50% of the remaining delegates if he were to take in Cruz's delegates and Rubio's delegates. If that were to happen, Kasich now only needs 50% to stop Trump. That's quite a scenario. I don't see it happening, though.
Not going to happen. No, it's over for Kasich. Trump is going to be the nominee, and I cannot wait to see the debates.
All right. Send me your thoughts about this. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at Lewis Motamedi.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's member of the day is Rashid Ogunyoku. Thank you, Rashid, for becoming a member. You too can become a member by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership.
Right.
And support alternative media. It's a great thing.
Thank you.
So let's get right into Hatriot Mail today. I have to do this because Dave has lost all composure. This is a very special Hatriot Mail. And Dave just can't handle it.
We have the intro first, though, right?
We have the intro.
Yeah.
And this is Hatriot Mail.
It's like taking an apple pie, filling it with pages from the Old Testament, topping it with hollow points, and serving it with a side of homophobia.
Right.
Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Oh, man. Yeah. What can we say? It's about Benjamin Dixon.
This one is about Benjamin Dixon.
This
Ben,
is the
of course,
best.
It's great. Ben co-hosted the show. And then this mysterious post appeared on Reddit, on our subreddit.
Yeah.
We don't know who wrote it. They made a name specifically to write this one post. And it's so incredible that we knew we had to turn it into a Hatriot Mail. So with no further ado, brace yourself.
Was David cucked on his own show while Lewis watched? Recently, I saw that the David Pakman Show was blacked by the African-American bull Benjamin Dixon. Personally, I'm incredibly proud of David for pushing the progressive envelope forward and working on improving race relations in the most enjoyable way possible. Not only did David share his show and his producer with Benjamin, after the show, Benjamin went home to David's house, put on David's pajamas, got in David's bed, and slept with David's wife. Once again, the David Pakman Show has proven to be the most progressive show in the entire existence of the planet.
Right.
It is truly liberal media.
Wow. I mean, that's the best ever, right?
Yeah. As far as I know, you've never been cucked in the entire 10 years you've been doing this show. So.
I don't even have a wife. I mean, I'm not married.
Yeah, but you can have an imagination here. People have vivid imaginations. And
I had to look up some of these terms.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty explicit stuff. Really.
Oh, yeah. It's explicit. Apparently, cucked in modern use is like a husband gives approval for his wife to have sexual relations with another man.
Yeah. And then is possibly even observing it.
Yes. Yeah. And then blacked, I think, is the same, but it's a black person. Like, there's a specific name for that.
Yes. Everything has a very specific name now.
Yeah. Is this part of polyamory? Like, is that the world we're operating in with these terms?
It could be. It's not a world I'm really in tune with.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, we shared this with Ben, and he found it funny. But man, I mean, that is just, it's the best. You know, I don't know how, I can't even tell if it's a joke, to be perfectly honest.
It's I can't either. I like to think it is, but then again, this person basically hid their identity.
Yeah.
During the writing process. Yeah.
Can you think of a better one? Is this the best ever?
This is top 3 Hatriot Mails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was watching CNN yesterday around lunchtime, and they had a Cruz supporter and a Trump supporter talking to Kate Bolduan on CNN. And the record sort of like just came to a screeching halt. It's like you're at a party and someone says something odd and all the music stops and everybody's staring at this one person. It's happened to Lewis many times. He knows the feeling. Probably happened to me a couple times too. And the Cruz supporter, who was claiming, by the way, that Cruz was just going to do great in Indiana, he's since dropped out of the race. The Cruz supporter said that Donald Trump is Hillary Clinton with a penis, and nobody knew what to do on that stage. And I encourage you, if you're watching with us, the guy on the left, the sort of heavier set guy, is the Trump supporter. The look on his face, there's about 2 to 3 seconds where he looks like he's seen a ghost. He doesn't know what just happened. Take a look, take a listen to this.
It's these. This is a battleground for the conservative future of this country, because if Donald Trump does win tonight and pull out half the delegates, you're going to see a very different Donald Trump tomorrow. It's going to be the Donald Trump that's going to look a lot more like Hillary Clinton than he does like Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, but you didn't even tell me. Give me a guesstimation on delegates.
I
think you get more than you got in New York?
Ted Cruz is going to do very well tonight. He will outperform expectations like he always does. I don't believe the conservative base of this party is ready to throw everything over to Donald Trump. In essence, we're not going to nominate Hillary Clinton with a penis.
Steve.
I said it.
Steve?
Yeah.
Barry?
Yeah.
Steve?
I don't
Why
really
does this
know
always
what
happen on my show? Why do you guys always throw around the crazy on my show? All I asked was for a delegate count.
You know you messed up when you make a Hillary penis joke that leaves a Trump advisor speechless, right? Trump's the guy who ridiculed Hillary taking a bathroom break during a debate. Trump's the guy who said Megyn Kelly from Fox News was bleeding from her genitals. And his advisor is shocked at the comment you made. That's a sign that you may have gone too far.
Maybe. Although I'd imagine Donald Trump has to have some serious advisors, at least a few. But I think anytime you say penis, it's just the record stops. And that's what happens.
And also the background of this is that this guy went on and confidently boasted about how Cruz was going to overperform like he always does, which is obviously not true.
He usually underperforms.
Often underperforms, and underperformed so poorly that he immediately left the race. I mean, it was such a bad performance that he said, I'm no longer even a candidate for president.
Yeah, but ask him to punch his wife and he'll show you how it's done.
He's the first guy there, yeah. Okay, Ted Cruz is out. Donald Trump really is the presumptive nominee at this point for the Republicans. Everything is possible. Anything can happen. This is totally uncharted territory. But there's a growing list of Republicans that will be supporting Hillary Clinton, who they believe will be the Democratic nominee over Donald Trump. I already mentioned during Cruz's goodbye speech, during which he punched and elbowed his wife in the face, he did not mention Donald Trump at all. He never mind an endorsement. He didn't even mention the name Donald Trump. Mark Salter, a former top aide to Senator John McCain, tweeted he's not going to be supporting Donald Trump, saying the GOP is going to nominate for president a guy who reads the National Enquirer and thinks that it's on the level. I'm with her. This is a Republican advisor. Remember Steve Schmidt, the Republican John McCain advisor from 2008? Really a very skilled strategist, I can't help but admit. He said on MSNBC, as reported here in a tweet by Daphna Linzer, Republicans need to ask whether they love their country more than their party. And Schmidt also predicted that a substantial number of Republican officials who have worked in Republican administrations are going to come out and say, no, none of this Trump stuff. I'm with Hillary Clinton. Ben Howe, editor of the conservative Red State blog, was more succinct. He tweeted, hashtag, I'm with her. Very, very straightforward. He later expanded on his rationale, going on to say, hey, I'm a fiscal conservative and I'm a social conservative. That will not change, but I will not vote for an egomaniacal authoritarian. Then there was Philip Klein, managing editor of the conservative Washington Examiner, who announced he was deregistering as a Republican and actually tweeted his party change certificate. He put that on Twitter. And then we also heard from Kristen Soltis Anderson. You may be right, I may be crazy, but it just may be a lunatic you're looking for, quoting Billy Joel there, saying that turns out to have worked well as a campaign slogan, apparently for Donald Trump. I have a couple other tweets here. Our buddy Ben Shapiro, who my interview with him will actually revisit this Friday, said, congratulate the Trump supporters. Tonight will be their high point. In 6 months, they'll be blaming the rest of us for their choices. And then I think we have one. Do we have one more tweet? Yes, from none other than Lindsey Graham, South Carolina senator. If we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed and we will deserve it. There's no doubt that Trump would have a hugely divisive effect on the Republican Party, but we can't forget that Hillary Clinton is also hugely divisive. Donald Trump has the highest unfavorable negative ratings of any recent politician, but Hillary Clinton is second there. So while it's very, very possible, Lewis, that a lot of Republican officials will switch and vote for Hillary Clinton, if indeed Trump and Hillary are the nominees, we also don't know what's going to happen with Hillary Clinton, with people voting for Hillary Clinton or choosing to opt out of the Democratic Party for the November election. We just don't know. 1/3 of Bernie supporters saying they would not vote for Hillary. I assume if Bernie loses and gives a really strong endorsement of Hillary Clinton, particularly if he can say in what ways Hillary Clinton is going to sort of acquiesce to some of his points of view, I think a majority of his supporters will ultimately vote for Hillary.
Yeah, we've talked to many Bernie supporters who say they're not going to vote at all.
Yeah, they said that in March.
Well, yeah, okay. And then we have talked to some that say they'd rather vote for Donald Trump. And if they feel that voting is that important, well, what are their options going to be? I mean, Jill Stein. So there are going to be some Hillary supporters. It's not going to be a high percentage. But
here's my word of caution. Here's my word of caution. No matter what polls come out about Trump versus Hillary or Trump versus Bernie, do not stay home in November on the assumption that Trump will be easily defeated. One of the best ways that Republicans, if they actually want Trump to win or just really want Bernie or Hillary to lose, one of the best ways Republicans can keep Democrats from voting is to say, hey, Trump's going to get crushed. And if you see a poll that says nationally, Bernie's 8-10 points ahead of Trump, or if it's Hillary's 8-10 points ahead of Trump, don't say to yourself, I don't need to go because Trump's way behind, because that actually represents one of the biggest opportunities for Trump if he is the nominee, which is people staying home because they assume he has no chance.
Yeah, good advice. Don't stay at home. I'm kind of expecting Trump now to become real Donald Trump instead of campaign Donald Trump,
which is what?
Now that he's running in this year. I think he'll be a bit more liberal.
Really?
Well, at this point, why wouldn't he? Now he knows he has to win the general election against either Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So how are you going to... He needs to pull people over from that side.
The only problem is he's already more liberal than Hillary Clinton on a number of issues, and he's as liberal as Bernie Sanders on a bunch of issues.
But he's not vocal about it.
He's not vocal about it. And also, when he uses sort of coded authoritarian type language where people may not even really notice that his view is the same. He'll say, it's stupid to go in and waste money taking out Middle East dictators and destabilizing the region or something like that. And it might not sound like the same position that Bernie Sanders has, but it effectively is. And on many of those issues, we've actually seen that they have the same position, which really makes it completely crazy to consider the huge conservative evangelical support that Trump has. But we've talked about that. I'm sure we will talk about that again. We'll take a break. Next, we will talk to AJ Angulo about for-profit colleges and universities.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined now by AJ Angulo, who's a historian, educational researcher, and the author of Diploma Mills, How For-Profit Colleges Stiffed Students, Taxpayers, and the American Dream. AJ, a lot of people seem to be under the impression that the for-profit college sort of idea is relatively new, but you've actually researched this. It goes all the way back to the 18th century, doesn't it?
Actually, it goes back even earlier than that. But yes, you're right. A lot of attention is placed on recent institutions. You've got Corinthian and ITT, even Trump University is taking up a lot of the real estate in the news headlines. But we can trace this pretty far back. I mean, we can go back to the colonial period. And I don't do this, but you can go even further back, even to ancient Greece if you wanted to. And you can see that Socrates is talking about merchants of knowledge and this whole idea of getting paid for your lessons and the problems that that creates. So it's a very old story, and I trace the American part of that story. So the U.S. history, its relationship to for-profit institutions since the colonial period.
To your knowledge, was there a sort of Socratic era equivalent to the 3-day real estate investment seminar?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But there is a great deal of there's a great deal of attention placed on for-profits, especially in the 19th century. You start to get observers saying that there's something fundamentally problematic about these. There are even European observers that come to the United States. They're investigating what the story is with for-profit institutions, and at that time it was business colleges. So traditional institutions, nonprofit institutions, they weren't doing a whole lot with business studies, and you have for-profits that are doing that. And so what you see is a lot of attention being placed on these institutions and a lot of questions being raised about whether or not they're just in it for the money or if they're actually doing anything good in terms of education.
In what sort of quantifiable ways can we distinguish now, in modern times, in terms of the quality and results of for-profit higher learning institutions versus not-for-profit?
There are a lot of measures. In fact, there's a very, very important study that was produced by the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, and it traced about a decade's worth of data and research, and they started looking at a lot of institutions. What they did is they compared nonprofit institutions with for-profit institutions, and they were looking at the outcomes. So they studied over 700 institutions. They looked at about 16,000 students, and they looked at the outcomes. And what the result was, and it shouldn't be too surprising given the headlines, is that these students walk away, for-profit students walk away with much more debt and lower chances of success in terms of the job market. And that's been repeated in a number of different smaller scale studies. But what we see is a consistent pattern where these institutions just simply aren't delivering the way that they claim they do.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here, because I really
Sure.
want to understand this and make sure that when we look at the data, we're looking at it in the best way possible. The defenders of for-profit institutions, and I am not one, but I want to present this argument to you, would say, AJ's right. If you simply look at debt coming out of school, graduation rates, loan default rates, career earnings, whatever it may be, it doesn't look particularly good for for-profit institutions. But that's because the economic demographics and the background of the average for-profit institution student is different than of a traditional nonprofit college or university. And they would argue, right, that if you actually compare similar populations from the for-profit and not-for-profit institutions, that all of those criteria you're talking about would be far less disparate. What do you say to that?
Well, that's a very, very good point. And the study that I just cited by the Community College Research Center at Columbia University, that study actually adjusted for all of the demographic issues that you're talking about. So this is a 10-year longitudinal study from 2002 to 2012. So it was 10 years worth of data, one of the most comprehensive studies that we have to date. And I think that they did a very good job. These are a couple of economists that were looking at this. And they use the economic language of, well, there's certain disparate results and that sort of thing. But the bottom line is, if you look at the numbers, these students were stiffed. and that's my argument in the book, that historically it's not just these last 10 years, it's also a story that's been going on for a very long time. So you're raising a really important point and a really good objection, but we've accounted for those kinds of things in a lot of research studies, and not to get too wonky about it, but what we see consistently over time is that you have this kind of result time and time again. The latest study this past year in 2016, what we've seen is a couple of economists that looked at whether or not there's a disadvantage if you have a for-profit degree. And they said there's a 20% disadvantage just at the outset of even getting a call back from employers. And so they've done some careful studies that way.
You're saying in terms of hiring chances, having a for-profit college on your resume is hurting you in some way in terms of how that's being seen by potential employers.
That's correct. And what they did was they did a mock resume, and the only difference was exactly that they had a for-profit diploma on the resume. And they studied major metropolitan areas, I imagine like Chicago, New York, LA, and different kinds of places. And they consistently saw a pattern where you had a 20% disadvantage if you graduated from a for-profit institution.
There's another argument that's made by some of the defenders of for-profit colleges, and it sort of grants part of what you're saying, right? Which is, okay, fine. Maybe in the grand scheme of things, the average college student is better off with a nonprofit college degree. But if we limit our analysis to two-year programs, right, associate degrees and other two-year programs, that actually those who have a two-year for-profit degree have a bigger earnings jump in that first post-college job than those in two-year nonprofit students. So saying, well, let's really look specifically at those students who are predisposed to be better off in a two-year program. The defenders will say, for that group, you may be better off in a for-profit program. What do you think of that?
I'm not seeing that data. I'm simply not seeing that data. And if it does exist, I'd like to take a look at it. But I've looked pretty extensively at all of the literature that's produced by scholars and researchers, as opposed to, let's say, private think tanks and privately funded organizations that might be receiving some of their funds from the for-profit sector. But as far as the scholarship, what I consider to be pretty strong scholarship, it's pretty consistent. They're not getting that bump that you're describing. But let's say they are. The question would be, for me, what kinds of jobs are they actually getting? And are they comparable? Because a lot of the litigation that we're seeing for Corinthian, ITT, Kaplan, a lot of these institutions are claiming numbers that really don't line up with reality. So I would actually want to take a very careful look at what those numbers are and what you just described, because the litigation is saying when we go to scratch the surface and investigate a little bit more carefully, the data is just not there.
If indeed the for-profit product is inferior, why do the for-profit colleges persist? In other words, what are they doing to sort of equalize their place in the marketplace such that they still have customers?
Yeah, they spend enormous amounts of money on marketing. So marketing and recruitment are two really important pieces to this overall puzzle, right? So if you were to look at these institutions and what they're actually spending on marketing and recruitment, it's astronomical compared to what nonprofit organizations do. So nonprofit colleges and universities, they spend a tiny fraction of their money on things like marketing and recruitment and that sort of thing. But if you look at for-profits, it's just incredible what they're spending. In fact, in 2009, Apollo Group, which is the umbrella company for University of Phoenix and a number of other institutions, Apollo spent more than Apple Corporation on marketing and recruitment. And I think that should just tell us why these institutions continue to persist. Even through the litigation, even through the investigations, you see that these institutions persist. And I think it has a lot to do with the marketing that they spend on.
Last thing I want to touch on is accreditation. Talk to us about some of the common either misconceptions, deceptions that students of or potential students of for-profit institutions can sometimes fall prey to. I mean, some for-profit institutions you are getting, aside from the quality of the education, which may vary, you are getting an accredited degree, but that's not always the case, is it?
Well, it's not only the case, even when it is accredited, you have to ask yourself, what are you actually getting? Because these accrediting organizations are not always above board with the way in which they evaluate these institutions, with the way in which they take the measures. What are they actually looking at? Let me give you a quick example.
Yeah.
Corinthian University, which is one of these for-profits, massive for-profit, with 125,000 students the day they collapsed in May of 2015. So last summer, May of 2015, that university went under. That was accredited right up to the day that they collapsed. So you got to ask yourself, what are you actually getting with these accrediting agencies? What are they actually looking at? And so in August of last year, there was an investigation by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And what they ended up asking is, who's on some of these accreditation boards? And what they found is one of the lead players in accreditation had 2/3 of its board members, the accrediting agency, right? 2/3 of its board members from other for-profit executives from other for-profit institutions. And some of them were under litigation. And
Right.
so I think that should tell us that we're not really getting an objective view on these accreditation measures.
I'll say. The book, once again, is Diploma Mills, How For-Profit Colleges Stiffed Students, Taxpayers, and the American Dream. We've been speaking with the book's author, AJ Angulo. Thanks so much for telling us about all this.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, David.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
A new poll says 57% of Democrats want Bernie Sanders to stay in the primary race until the Democratic National Convention in the summer. This is according to a new NBC News poll that was released yesterday. Let's look at the numbers here, which we have to put on screen for people. What should Sanders do about his campaign for president? Clinton voters say 28% of Clinton voters say Bernie should stay in through the convention. 89% of Sanders voters and 57% of Democrats overall say that Bernie should stay in all the way to the convention. 0% of Sanders voters say that he should drop out now. 16% overall of Democrats believe that it is time for Bernie Sanders to go. As we covered yesterday, this is very likely to be a contested convention. Bernie Sanders said it. The numbers from Indiana support this. So there are really two main questions here, Lewis, as far as Bernie Sanders staying in. Number one, what is the path to the nomination if Hillary Clinton doesn't clinch but is ahead by 200, 250, 300 pledged delegates, right? If you get to the convention, it's a contested convention. If Bernie is down 200 or 300 delegates, what's the case to be made for giving him the nomination? It can't be just he's more liberal, because it needs to make sense democratically and electorally. What would the case be to make for giving it to Bernie in a contested convention if he's down?
I don't know, because you're not supposed, as a super delegate, you're not supposed to be voting on any whims or on any instincts or on who you think is the best candidate, right? I mean, in an ideal situation, they should be allocated based on the
who
number
won your state.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that case, it would be Hillary Clinton's nomination.
That's question number one, right? What would the rationale be in a contested convention where Bernie is down several hundred pledged delegates to have superdelegates overwhelmingly support him or have pledged delegates switch after a first ballot? That needs to be sort of figured out, particularly as a contested convention looks more and more likely. Issue number two is, if there's a contested convention and Bernie doesn't ultimately win, okay, what specifically do Bernie supporters want at the convention to be open to supporting Hillary Clinton? 2/3 of Bernie supporters have already said, if it's Hillary, we will support Hillary. 1/3 of Bernie supporters have said we will not or we might not. What do you think they would want, Lewis, to consider supporting Hillary Clinton? Maybe just the threat of Trump would be enough.
That would help. Yeah. What do they want? They're not going to get it from Hillary Clinton, whatever they want, because she's the establishment candidate.
Well, but hold on a second. They may not get a $15 minimum wage. Hillary wants 12 or whatever. But if Bernie Sanders can make a good case that it is of utmost importance that his supporters, who have been with him for months and months, not allow Donald Trump or whoever is the eventual Republican nominee to now have 4 years during which he could potentially appoint 3 Supreme Court justices, right? Bernie Sanders could make a pretty strong case for why we should rally as progressives around Hillary Clinton, in spite of her lack of progressivism on many issues. If Bernie supporters really trust Bernie the way they say they do, you would think they would trust him in that endorsement if it eventually comes.
Yes. Although I'd expect conspiracy theories to start flying around, like a cabinet position offered by Hillary, if you were to do that, it would help. Yeah, it would help.
We've been talking about these anti-trans bathroom bills. One has been passed in Mississippi. One has been passed in North Carolina. We talked about the one in Oxford, Alabama. And the Oxford, Alabama bill was specifically meant to fight back against really evil retailer Target, which apparently is evil for saying, according to Oxford, Alabama, the city council there, that Target is bad because they said people can use whatever bathroom is more comfortable to them based on their gender identity rather than their birth genitalia. By and large, there are rarely, if ever, problems with this policy for bathroom use that corresponds to sexual identity. And there's like obvious logistical problems here as well, right? First of all, who's going to check genitalia? If you see someone in a bathroom and you say, I think this person, Lewis, might be in the wrong bathroom, who checks genitalia? That's a logistical problem.
It is. Logic would suggest that you call the police and then they figure things out.
They
but
do a check,
they are
yeah.
bound by certain laws too. And so I don't really know.
So then who checks the birth certificates? Because the way many of these rules are written, these laws, they say you need to be using the bathroom that corresponds to the sex listed on your birth certificate, because you can get your license changed now in many states if you identify differently than the biological sex you were born with. Nobody carries around their birth certificates with them. At least I've never met anybody that does in the United States. So that becomes a very complicated thing. And then, of course, what if a trans woman who looks female enters the men's room, since it corresponds, remember, to her birth certificate genitalia? That's going to go fine. So these are a bunch of the different logistical issues we've talked about. Anyway, the real problems are the anti-trans people, right? People like Mike Huckabee, who say, oh, if I could have done this when I was in high school, I would have pretended to be a girl in order to go check out naked girls in the locker room. Or that guy in Seattle who exposed himself to little girls in a public swimming pool restroom to prove, I don't know, some kind of point about the laws. Of course, all he proved was that he was breaking the law with indecent exposure and lewd behavior. And now the anti-gay, anti-trans, bona fide hate group, American Family Association, has admitted that they're sending men into women's bathrooms at Target to, quote, test the barriers. This is Sandy Rios speaking. She's from the American Family Association, speaking to Breitbart News Daily. And this is the brilliant plan from the AFA to test this. Take a listen.
Well, it's absolutely. This is going to be the net effect. You know, I think there is no question that when you say there are no barriers in the bathroom, and that if men or women feel like they are men or women, the opposite of however they are equipped, and you have no restrictions, the net effect will be people will not be stopped. We've already had people testing this, going into Targets and men trying to go into bathrooms. There is absolutely no barrier. And so the chief concern, even more than just, I think, the trauma for certainly little girls of having men dressed like women coming in their bathrooms, the chief concern of the American Family Association is the predators who will take advantage.
Yeah, those predators seem to be almost non-existent, because almost every instance of this that we hear about is someone like Sandy Rios's henchman testing this. Let me see if I get it. To prove that it's unsafe for women to have transgender women enter their bathroom, homophobic men are going to dress up on women and go into women's bathrooms. I mean, does this make any sense to you?
Not really. What bothers me is just this implication that they're all predators, and that anytime this is happening, people are at risk. It's just, I don't know where this fear came from,
Yeah.
but I don't know if they know this. any guy who wants to walk through that bathroom door can do so at any time. I mean, and assault someone. So
right. If someone's looking to go and do something predatory, you're going to go in and do it. And I don't know that being able to do it if you're dressed in the right way is going to all of a sudden enable predatory behavior.
And either way, it's against the law. It doesn't matter what you look like, what you're dressed like, or what sex you are, or what bathroom you're going into. If you're doing something predatory, that's against the law altogether.
Now, we get asked about this, we get criticized about this a lot because it's like, hey, it's two dudes sitting in a room. You guys don't know what it's like. We have a female voice here today in studio that we could turn to for an opinion on this. And why don't we go? You will be able to hear her but not see her. Let's ask Rachel. Rachel, when you hear about these laws, are you scared? Do you say, oh, I don't want transgender women in the bathroom because this might make me at more risk? Or does that not really make sense to you?
It absolutely doesn't scare me in any sense. I would say, if anything, if someone is going to enter the bathroom, they're not going to stop themselves because they said, oh, well, actually, I have read about these laws on the New York Times, and now I know it's acceptable. I think if they are going to enter anyway, the chances are they aren't keeping up with the news and say, oh, I can use this cloak of a law to potentially protect myself when doing something predatory.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That is exactly right. I completely agree. Now, I would assume, Rachel, you've probably been in bathrooms where transgender women went in there. Women's bathrooms are all stalls. You probably were none the wiser.
Definitely. I think if anything, just taking into consideration this type of homophobia, it's probably almost more dangerous if a trans woman has to go into a male bathroom because of their given sex.
That is exactly right. And that is what I have been saying, Lewis. At least one female voice vindicating what I have been saying. You're telling me the transgender woman goes to the men's room in Oxford, Alabama, and everything is fine and dandy and nobody complains? It's ridiculous. The side that wants less government wants genital checks and birth certificates checked in bathrooms. Small government. It doesn't make any sense. We have a voicemail number. It's 219-2-DAVID-P. Call anytime. Here's a voicemail I received.
David Packman, this is Troy York from Allendale, Alabama. You were talking about Oxford, Alabama, and I didn't like the way you said Alabama like 3 or 4 times in a very condescending and practical way. And maybe instead of worrying about Oxford, Alabama, you should be worried about that one town in Massachusetts and all those towns in Massachusetts.
All right. Well, listen, I'll worry about Massachusetts.
A dude like you could never get laid because they're all lesbians.
I think he's probably talking about Northampton, Massachusetts, where the show originated, considered a sort of top lesbian destination of the country. Yeah, listen, there's plenty of heterosexual women in Northampton. I don't live in Northampton. I live in Boston. I said the name of Alabama. I'm sorry if you have so much of a self-conscious nature about Alabama that me merely mentioning the state makes you feel bad, but I don't know that I did anything wrong there. We have a fantastic bonus show for you today. I don't even have time to tell you what stories are on it, but you can sign up on our website, davidpakman.com. Plenty more stories later on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.